Yeah, one thing that kind of I will always remember is the increase in the condo fees. So I didn't budget for the pace that they would increase. Obviously, you're going to expect an increase in your condo fees year over year, but the pace at which they were to increase, that's what caught me off guard, both on my previous property and on my current property.
Welcome to Real Stories in Real Estate with your host, Denise Laframboise. Real people sharing real stories about their adventures in real estate.
Hey there, this is Real Stories in Real Estate. I'm your host, Denise Laframboise, and today we've got Colin with us to talk about something most home buyers go through, right? Being a first-time home buyer. So Colin, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. So first off, thanks for inviting me onto the podcast. I know there was a little scheduling conflict last month, but happy we were able to reschedule and allow me to share my personal story as a first-time home buyer. So just to cue it up, I have been a follower and listener of all the other episodes, and I love the community that you've built based on the idea of sharing stories of others. And I think the best way to really just settle the anxiety when it comes to purchasing real estate is just to hear firsthand accounts, both positive and negative, just to kind of prepare them for the unknown. It also highlights the importance of using industry professionals such as yourself to navigate the trials and tribulations of homeownership. But today I plan on talking about my journey as a first-time home buyer. So yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love that you're here. And honestly, like this all started because people will always tell people the positives of everything that happened. But you know what? Everyone's life and experience is not perfect. And sometimes we need to hear about the negative parts too, either so we can prepare or so that we don't repeat someone else's mistakes. So it's a really, really valuable experience to talk about the negative as well.
Couldn't agree more.
So let's get after it, right? So you wanted to buy a house, first time ever.
Yeah, so I mean, the story starts a bit earlier than that. So me and my longtime friend moved to Toronto together. It was circa 2012, and we had an incredible condo. It was front and Sherbourne Street. We were paying below market rates, so life was good. And my life was disrupted in 2013 when this roommate announced that they were planning on going on an extended trip to South America. So part of me was very happy and excited, but obviously there was a looming angst or anxiety kind of percolating up of what was next. So I had two competing thoughts, either find a new roommate or explore the idea of home ownership. And obviously the first step there is always, a little personal evaluation or a self-assessment of my finances, which ultimately fell quite short. I think at that time I'd probably be able to afford the trunk of someone's car that was parked in an underground garage. But
And were you still planning to stay downtown?
yeah. So my goal was always to own a piece of property in downtown, and this was kind of that catalyst that just pushed me off the edge to bite the bullet. So at the time, I was working as a financial service representative with TD while also moonlighting as a bartender at some bars downtown. I was confident that I'd be able to afford the payments on paper, but qualifying for the mortgage would have been another story. And like I mentioned, this was pre B20, so there wasn't even a stress test to prepare for. But luckily, my family and we emigrated from Ireland when I was a child, and the idea of home ownership and personal finances were instilled in both me and my siblings from a young age. I knew how to create budgets and forecast expenses. So I opened up Excel, prepared a proposal for my parents to review, and wanted to ask for their assistance with the down payment side of the equation.
And did you only think about down payment? You didn't look at co-signing?
Exactly. Yeah. So at this point, it was, I didn't want to sacrifice too much of my ego. I wanted to be able to afford this house on my own, even though I was asking the bank of mom and dad for some assistance. And yeah, so in my mind, I was that proverbial clean client. I was earning fifty to $60,000 in my mind again. But really, I learned pretty quickly that we could only consider my base salary. So what we were able to use on the application versus what I felt like I was earning were two completely different situations.
Yeah, we see
Also,
that a lot, right? Like people will
of
put,
course,
this is my income, and you're like, that's how much hits your bank account, but some of this is tips, or some of this is bonus, or some of this was
exactly.
extra vacation pay for a special situation. You
Yeah.
can't always use it with all the lenders.
Yeah, and this was before I had begun my journey on the lender side, so I wasn't as knowledgeable with what I could get away with in terms of qualification. But the other issue was that there was a lingering unpaid debt from my year stint in Australia. So before I went to Australia, I made sure I paid off all my debts. However, my final bill of my phone bill at that time, I won't tell you the service provider, there was some residual interest lingering, and this ended up just going to collections after I think 6 or 7 months, and obviously all the notifications they were sending out were landing on deaf ears because I wasn't in the country. So I came back and thought I was going to buy a property, and to my astonishment, not only was I going to have difficulty qualifying for the mortgage, I was also going to have to overcome this unpaid debt issue that was on my credit bureau. So needless to say, my mom had to jump on the deal, not only to assist with down payment, but also as a guarantor, which was a bit of a blow to my ego. I had that intention of qualifying on my own, but life always works out a bit different.
And for our listeners, so a guarantor versus a co-signer, right? So a guarantor, we're not necessarily relying on their income, but more their strength, right? So it's often the case for support with credit issues, like you mentioned, but they're not necessarily we're using their income to qualify. It's more just like another person saying, "Yeah, no, I'm this is a good person, and we're going to help you qualify," right?
Exactly. Yep. So upon closing, life got real very quick. The money that I had initially budgeted for came and went within a blink of an eye, and then there was also some unexpected costs that popped up, as they always do. But the funny thing is dreams and reality tend to have a big gap. And while I achieved my dream of owning my first condo, the reality was I owned a one-bedroom condo where I rented that one bedroom to a friend, and I slept on a mattress on the floor for the first 9 months of my home ownership dream,
I
which
love this. This is like you do what you got to do to get into the market, right?
absolutely it brings me to a John C. Maxwell quote where successful people are the ones who do the things others aren't willing to do. And while this living arrangement wasn't ideal, it was necessary in order for me to achieve my goal. But I eventually refinanced and I removed my mom from the mortgage. I added a HELOC onto the registration. And then fast forward to today, I've sold that condo. However, before I sold it, I used that HELOC to assist with the purchase of a pre-construction project where I was able to leverage the equity in my first condo and structure a payment plan for the down payment on the second property. So essentially, I was taking those 5% down payment increments off of the HELOC, and then I would repay as much as possible before the next installment was due. And I think I topped out the HELOC around 50,000 K or $50,000 for the third installment. However, the final 5% requirement wasn't due until closing, so I had a lot of time to repay that balance down before I was able to close on the condo.
I love
But
it.
yeah,
And that
the
was
happiest.
pre
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
B20 too, right? So that was like you
Pre
could
B20.
refinance up to 95% of the value of your condo.
Yeah,
The good
all
old
the good
days.
stuff, the good old
Yeah.
days. But the
That's how we
happiest
got our
moment.
second property too, right? Like refinance up to 95%, then we can go buy another one and keep this as a rental. Now we're stuck at 80%, which is still good, but you got to wait a bit longer sometimes to get into multiple properties, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, so my goal really was to own that initial property and convert it into an investment property. But life doesn't always work out the way we intend. But the happiest moment of this story was when I received a nervous call from my mom. So this was after I had ended up selling that first condo. I get a call from my mom, and she's quite shocked, concerned, and she learned that I deposited a bank draft into her account without her knowing, and just to
Hmm.
repay both her and my dad for allowing me to achieve my home ownership dream. So, fast forwarding to today, they were able to help me get into the condo market or the home ownership market, but they were also able to retain the same money that they got. So whenever you hear those stories of the bank of mom and dad, people just think that, the millennials are asking for a handout. But the reality is that we just need that little bit of assistance in order to get ourselves in the market. And the full intention is to repay those funds back to the proper owners.
Yeah, or get your inheritance early, right? Like we had help from parents buying our first house, and it's kind of funny when you look at it now because they gave us $10,000. That was the majority of the down payment on a property
Yes.
in Richmond Hill at the time, right?
Yeah.
It isn't
It's
today,
insane. No, God,
right?
no.
But at the time, like that was the piece that got us into home ownership faster, got us self-sufficient faster. And like it probably would have cost them a lot more money to help us for years if we were saving our own down payment.
Yeah. So I have a younger sibling, and if they were to demonstrate or use the exact same model that they use with me, they'd probably be looking at a down payment of almost $200,000 for a property with the current market value. So, obviously timing has a big impact to when you can employ these tactics, and also where you're looking at buying will have a big impact. But for myself, I was fortunate to take advantage of the moment in time.
You talk about the good things. What about the bad things? You said there were surprise costs that came up.
Yeah, so I mean, legal costs. There's always additional fees at closing, and even when you buy it and when you sell a property, you usually do your own budget for how much money you're going to have at closing and how much money you actually net versus how much money you budget for. There's usually a pretty big gap between those two figures, which is a bit of a blow. But that's just a part of the process. So I think working with, again, like I said at the beginning, working with professionals such as yourself who have gone through this process multiple times and they're aware of what the true figures are likely to be at closing, it's going to help you prepare your expectations.
Yeah, and I think closing costs are a big one that everybody saves for a down payment, and that's an easy calculation to figure out how much down payment you need. But then closing costs are really ambiguous, and
Yes.
they actually are not confirmed until the lawyer figures them out, maybe a couple days before closing, if you're lucky, right? But the person that you're buying from, like if you're buying a resale property, maybe they have prepaid their property taxes. Maybe they prepaid the hot water tank rental, and you have to pay for all these things that you didn't even think were a
One,
factor.
yeah, one thing that kind of I will always remember is the increase in the condo fees. So I didn't budget for the pace that they would increase. Obviously, you're going to expect an increase in your condo fees year over year, but the pace at which they were to increase, that's what caught me off guard, both on my previous property and on my current property. This was a new construction that I bought, and I'd say condo fees have gone up year over year on average of maybe 7 to 12%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do you plan for that? Probably not. You're like, I
Did
just
not,
want this
I mean,
condo.
exactly. I usually plug in around 2.5% growth or appreciation for expenses like that. But again, 7 and 12% was not really accounted for. And obviously that throws your whole monthly cash flow into a whack.
Let's talk condo versus freehold.
Ooh.
Is there stuff that you prefer of condo? Why condo?
Well, condo initially was affordability. So I got proximity where I wanted to live as well as the affordability component. Also, it's usually that first, rung on the real estate ladder that you have to get in order to climb up to the rest of the rungs. But me and my partner are expecting the birth of our first son in the coming months. So obviously, freehold is probably going to be the next thing that we're going to be exploring.
Or
But
bigger condo?
or a bigger condo. Well, this was the bigger condo. This was my upgrade, and it's already proving to be non-sufficient for a growing family.
I do find with first time buyers too, sometimes they're like, I like if you qualify for less money when you have condo fees calculated into your stress test now, they'll say, oh, I want to buy a freehold. But the thing you forget is those condo fees cover a lot of maintenance that's all on you on a freehold.
It's a good point.
Right? Like if the roof needs repair or the furnace needs to be replaced, like that's all you in a freehold property.
Yeah. And also time. So, you have to shovel your own driveway. You have to
I
take out your
do.
own garbage. And, that's fortunately something that we don't have to do, whether that's good or bad. But yeah, there's always benefits and there's pros and cons to both options, but it will always boil down to whatever the applicant's situation is.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything that you would let people know if they're buying their first home that, as a,
100%. I would say, obviously you want to be reaching out to your professionals, so your financial advisors for budgeting, your mortgage agents, your brokers, and your real estate professionals. But also, don't rely just on their knowledge. Do your own research, find what you need, so that way you can have these educated conversations when you are meeting with those professionals. One thing that I'm currently discovering with this whole childbirth journey is every time that I've gone to the healthcare professional, they always end the conversation with, "Do you have any questions for me?" And it wasn't until we completed our 2-day prenatal course that I actually had sufficient knowledge to ask relevant questions to the professional. So definitely, I would say my advice would be do your own research and prepare yourself with questions for these professionals, so that way everyone can be on the same page.
that's really good advice. Um, and then do you want to share it? Like, so you work in this field now.
I do, yeah. So I have been working in the real estate and broker channel for about 10 years now. So I am currently a BDM with MCAP here in the GTA, but I started my journey as a funder with Scotiabank. I was a fulfillment specialist and underwriter with Paradigm Quest. I was a national director of business development, taking care of the white label products for Dominion Lending Centers and Centum Mortgage. And like I mentioned, I now work for Canada's largest non-bank mortgage finance company, which is MCAP.
And now you help all kinds of first-time buyers,
I see it all now.
right? You have a huge ripple effect of how many first-time buyers you can help in this role.
Yeah, and my journey really allows me to apply first off some empathy, but also some firsthand experience on what these consumers are going through, and just really keeping them in mind when we're working with our underwriters to get these approvals done for our broker partners.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I
Yeah,
really
thank you for
appreciate
the
you
invitation.
coming.
Yeah, hopefully my journey, there's lessons to be learned for some of the audience. Yeah, I appreciate the invite.
Even the credit thing, yeah, I don't know if it's the correct number, but something I read recently said there were 40% of credit bureaus have some sort of error on them. And so looking at that ahead and reviewing it with a professional, like the credit bureau that we see, the very detailed one, is different than the one that the consumer sees. And
Absolutely.
often some of those things that they don't know about, like an old gym membership or something that you've forgotten about that was attached to an old email, can come
Mhm.
back to haunt you.
Of course, yeah. It was very unfortunate to be so far down the rabbit hole in my first purchase and find out that, 76 cents worth of interest was, almost going to sabotage the entire file.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And sometimes these are very small debts, but they have very big effects if they stay there for a long time.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Also,
I
clients with similar names, like first names and last names, sometimes we also see some misreported debts showing on their credit bureau. So if you do have a common name, it's probably worthwhile just contacting Equifax or TransUnion to take a look at your own credit bureau.
Yeah, I know even when we review, like when we're getting ready to do the pre-approval process and we're reviewing somebody's credit, and they're like, no, my score's good. And you're like, do you know what we're looking at? Like, we're looking at this full detailed report. We're looking to see if, like, so even it'll ping like what your job is, because sometimes if you have a common name, someone else's job will be on your document or someone
Exactly.
else's address or someone else's credit card. Like there could be all kinds of things on there, or you got a credit card and you haven't used it in a while and it doesn't report anymore. We need it to report so that your score is higher. Like all of those things that you think, oh, it's just a score. It's a lot more than a score on that credit
Absolutely.
bureau. Yeah.
It's also interesting how the two agencies will report differently. Like, I'm sure you're aware of this, but TransUnion typically have a higher FICO score showing than our Equifaxes, and most lenders will always default to an Equifax report. So making sure that you're reviewing one and not the other, or even both, just to get a full picture, I think that's beneficial.
Yeah, yeah. And then even just the scores, right? Like it's not just the FICO score. There's like a BNI score, there's a NAB
Exactly.
score, there's all these other scores that say like how likely you are to have a bankruptcy or have unpaid debts. All of these scores matter. It's not just the one everyone talks about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think you've shared a lot of great stuff for first time buyers, and I hope that somebody listens to this and has helped, and then maybe they're like, that guy worked at MCAP and that's what I want. We'll see.
Let's hope.
Right.
Yeah,
Thanks so much, Colin.
my pleasure. I really appreciate this.
Awesome. For everybody else, this is Real Stories in Real Estate. Thanks for joining us, and check out this and other podcasts anywhere you listen to your podcasts: iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon, Apple. We are everywhere.